Can you all see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So yesterday we were covering stereo nets and stereographic projections. We have not yet understood what a stereo net is. We have covered stereographic projection. So today we will learn about stereo net, basically the graph on which you make these plots. But we saw like what a stereographic projection is. It is a projection where you project onto a 2D equatorial plane by joining lines from a feature that occurs on the surface of a sphere. We join lines to the opposite pole, and where those lines intersect the equatorial plane, that is the stereographic projection. So the objects should exist on the surface of a sphere. So the first thing that we do is, if you have a line or a plane, you extend it so that it intersects the surface. Okay, so for example, line intersects this at a point here, a plane intersects in form of an arc. So now this arc and this dot are on the surface of a sphere. So then you do its 3D projection by joining these to the opposite to the pole in opposite hemisphere. So you join line from this point to the pole in opposite hemisphere, and this intersection is your stereographic projection. Similarly, you do this for that arc that we got from a plane. So you join lines to the pole in opposite hemisphere, and then you get this projected arc onto this equatorial plane. And then we learned like what happens due to changes in inclination. So basically what happens is, as the line becomes vertical, or like even for the plane, uh, it is at the center. A plane is a straight line passing through the center when the plane is vertical. You also note that it is a straight line here. So this one is a straight line. So a straight line passing through a center means vertical plane. A dot at the center means vertical line. And this outer boundary is called the primitive. So a circle along the primitive, that's a plane which is horizontal. A dot which is plotted at the primitive is also horizontal, but that line is pointing that way. Okay, a horizontal line could be pointing like this, it could be pointing like that. So where it is located, so if for example a line is plotted here, that fourth number point got plotted here, now that line is pointing towards north, this line is pointing towards east. But like if it is pointing towards east, it is also pointing towards west at the same time. So whenever you will get a line there, you will actually get 2 points, 4, like that. Just like in the plane, it became a whole circle instead of a arc only in one half of the circle. Okay. Also, you will note that as the inclination increases, it gets closer and closer to the center. For a circle, the line also gets more and more straight. The more horizontal a plane is, this arc is more curved. It is most curved when it follows this circle here. But as you approach the center, it also starts to get more and more straight, like this. So yesterday I asked you simply, it was very simple question. Represent these three faces of cube onto a stereo net. Okay, so represent poles. Okay, so these perpendicular lines are the poles. Uh, Let me take screenshot of this. And these also you have to represent on a screen on a stereo net. Okay, so plane number one, how will it plot? How will plane number one plot? Has anyone attempted it? And let's also say okay, we'll not define north south now, but you can imagine like north south east west. So what do you think of plane number 1? What is the inclination of plane number 1? Is it inclined? Is it horizontal? Is it vertical? How in this cube, how many planes are vertical? Like out of those 1, 2, and 3? Yes, plane number 1 is vertical. So a vertical plane plots as a straight line. Okay, it plots as a straight line passing through the center of the circle of the stereo net. And it is also oriented east west. Okay, so those who have just joined, we are just solving the problems from yesterday's homework. So you have to basically represent these 1, 2, 3 planes on a stereo net. So that becomes green plane, plane number 1. Okay, what about plane number 2? Plane number 2 is also vertical, but what is the orientation? It's if 1 is like east west oriented, 2 is north south oriented. So plane number 2 will show up a straight like this as a straight line passing through the center. What about plane number 3? The purple plane. How do you think it will plot? What is its orientation? If it is horizontal, orientation doesn't even matter. It is a horizontal plane, right? So it will plot at the primitive circle. Okay, so that 2 is the pole to, well, let me draw this with blue color. Okay, so 2 is the pole to blue plane, 3 is the pole to purple plane, and 1 is the pole to that green plane. So where will these plot now? Where will pole number 1 plot? It is 90 degrees to plane 1. If plane 1 is vertical, what is the pole to plane 1? Is it vertical or horizontal? It is horizontal. Okay, it will plot. It is also oriented north south, and because it is horizontal, you will actually get 2 dots. Imagine in this circle. So if you have a line which is horizontal, this point number 4, you can extend it on this side, and you get actually 2 dots for this case. Okay, okay, so that is 1, and this dot is, let me call it 1n, normal to 1. The blue plane is vertical, the pole to it is horizontal. Okay, so the blue plane is vertical, the number 2 plane, and the pole to it is horizontal. So number 2 will plot here, but it will be blue in color. Let's call it 2n. What about number 3? Where will that plot? So plane number 3 we have plotted, it is horizontal. What about the pole? What about this pole, which is basically perpendicular vector to plane number 3? Where will that plot? What is its orientation? Take a look at this. If you have a horizontal plane like this, that is a norm perpendicular to that horizontal plane. That perpendicular is vertical. So where will vertical line plot? How will vertical line plot? intersection of 1 and 2, or basically at the center of the primitive. Is this clear? Any doubts in this part? Okay, next we have to plot this. Let me add fourth also. 1, 2, 3, fourth. That one also you should plot. Okay. No need to plot the base. The fourth is the face that is behind. Okay. Face number fourth is behind you. It's not very difficult. Okay. So if you look, if you try to imagine, this is east-west direction, and this will be north-south direction. If you look at it from the top, it will appear this is a square base. It is not to be plotted. If you want to plot it, it is just a horizontal, so it will appear at the primitive. The fourth face is the face behind. Okay, so this is the behind face, the triangular face that is behind you. Okay, now here they are neither horizontal, they are neither vertical. So what is happening is, one is, let's say, oriented east west, two will be oriented north south, then like that. Okay, so one will plot as a curved line, so it is not a straight line because it is not vertical. It will not be along primitive because it is not horizontal, it is somewhere in between, so it will plot like this. 3 is this one. It is also oriented, so they are oriented in the same direction, but they are dipping in opposite direction. Okay, this is dipping in that direction, that is inclined in that direction. So number 3 will plot like this. Now number 2 will plot like this, and number 4 will plot like this. Okay, is this clear, everyone? So you look at the orientation. Okay, so we've said, like, let's say this is east, this is north, so this direction is east and that direction is north. Is this clear? Plane 4 is as I said, it is not the square base. Plane 4 is the behind face, the triangular face. It is not the base. Okay, so it becomes a little bit difficult to draw. Maybe I should say fourth instead of writing here. Fourth is the face behind, there, like that. Okay. Understood? It is this face. triangular face that is at the back. So let's discuss about this thing, the pole to the plane as well. So some of these you have to like in your notes. This is just for practice, just to make you understand. In exams, you will write these things like this, that you will understand from your PYQ course. Okay. All right. So what is pole to a plane? So a plane, you can represent a plane, can be represented. Okay, a plane can be represented using its pole on a stereo net. And you know, pole is a line, it appears as a dot. So if you have any plane, let's say this is the plane that we're trying to plot. Okay. This will be the pole. You draw that angle, it is 90 degrees to the plane. And when you make its stereo net, okay, let me maybe change the color of the stereo net. So this black plane, let's say it plots like this. It is oriented towards northeast direction. That is what we call the strike direction. Okay. So it is neither north, maybe that is north direction, that is east direction. It is somewhere in between. So it will plot like this. Then each half circle in a in a stereo net, we will see it just now. Okay. From center to diameter, this much distance is equivalent to 90 degrees. From here to here, this distance is equivalent to 90 degrees. So you take same distance from the center of this great circle, okay, and you go in this direction. So the pole of this plane will plot somewhere here. So you take 90-degree angle, and how much you have to go? So this much is, this distance is equivalent to 90 degrees. You may say like, sir, this is distance, this is not angle. I will just explain how it can be angle. So how a stereo net is oriented. Okay. So it will plot like that. So this is the pole and this is the plane. Is this clear, everyone? All right. So the next part that we have to cover is the actual stereo net part. So we'll discuss a few things on the stereo net itself. What is a stereo net? Okay. So what is the definition of a stereo net? A stereo net is a circular diagram. It is basically your equatorial plane It is a circular diagram used to plot and analyze the orientation of lines and planes in 3D space using stereographic projections. Okay, so using stereographic projections. What does There are two types of stereonets. Okay, so there are two main types of stereonets. One of them is called the Wolf net and another one is called the Schmidt net. So there is a Wolf's net and the Schmidt's net. Schmidt's net we will use in another subject called structural geology. Okay, it is not as commonly used in mineralogy. Okay, so this is formed by, so there are like slight difference. Both of them are formed by stereographic projections, but there are like slight differences between the two. So Wolf's net, first of all, it has what we call equal area projection. Whereas Schmidt's net, we call the projection equal angle. You don't have to go into too much details of these, but one is trying to preserve the area of the things, another one is trying to preserve the angles. For example, whenever you plot from 3D to 2D, some distortion will occur because it is still a projection. The exact thing occurs in 3D space. The same thing happens when you, let's say, project maps of different countries on which exist on the 3D sphere surface of Earth. When you project those countries, their shapes onto a 2D map, some distortion occurs, and then there is a choice to make what distortion you choose. So the most common map, those world maps that we see, they distort area quite a bit because they are trying to preserve the shape of the countries. If they try to preserve the area of the countries, the shape gets distorted. So it's a similar thing here. Shape gets distorted means angles between things do not stay the same, so they get distorted. Countries like Russia, Canada, which are in northern hemisphere, they appear extra large. They are quite big countries, but they appear very big, bigger than their actual size. And again, the main reason is that projection. You're projecting, and in that projection you are not preserving the area. So there are some projections which preserve area, there are some projections which will try to preserve the angles. Okay, so it is equal area projection, it is equal angle projection. So because it is equal area projection, area is preserved. In this, angles are preserved. It is typically used in, commonly used in structural geology. Okay, so why in structural geology? Because it is good for what is called density analysis. we will discuss this briefly in structural geology. But the thing is, density analysis, contouring analysis means sometimes you will go out into the field. Field means basically look at the rocks, not in a lab, but in general in their natural setting, and you take many measurements. And when you plot, let's say 100 measurements on a paper, you may do some statistical analysis. Density of points means in a given area how many points are plotted. So for those kind of things, you need. I think I reversed these things on top. This should be Wolf's net, and that should be, the other one should be Schmidt's net. Okay. Let me just delete this. So this will be good for angular relationships. This is commonly used in structural geology, whereas this is commonly used in crystallography. We want to preserve angular relationships between the crystal faces. That is why it is used more commonly here. Crystal faces or symmetry elements. Okay, so this is the main reason why we use this more commonly in crystallography. And between symmetry elements. Okay, how do they look in reality? We will see. So this is a Schmidt net, this is a Wolf's net. In Schmidt's net, first of all, in Wolf's net, these angles you can see here are always preserved. This is 90 degree. This angle is again 90 degree. Those angles are always 90 degrees. If you look at this Schmidt net, this angle is 90 degree, true. But this angle is no longer 90 degree. It is more than 90 degree over there. But if you look at the area, okay, so if you look at the area, so here this area is very big. This area is very small. In the second case, see, it has become longer but narrower. So this area and this area are both same. Okay, one is broader, but it is also a little shorter. Okay. Do you all understand the difference between these two? Is this clear, everyone? So, what are the different parts of a stereo net? Okay. So, parts of a stereo net, or let's say elements. So I'll show you a stereo net and then we will discuss what are those parts. So this is what an actual stereo net looks like. This is a wolf net. So the outer boundary, we already discussed about that. What is this outer boundary called? That is called the primitive. This is the north pole of the stereo net, not necessarily the geographic north pole. Just like on Earth, you have latitudes and longitudes. Okay, here you have what we call great circles and small circles. So your longitudes, you on an Earth, all the longitudes converge at the poles. So here also the great circles converge at the poles. So these are the great circles. I'm just drawing one of them. Okay, these are the great circles. The blue one also I'll draw. These are the small circles. Okay, so you have great circles and small circles. That's the center of the stereo net over there. Okay. Do you all understand this part? And the primitive, which is the outer circle, okay, it basically is equivalent to the equatorial plane. The whole thing in that 3D diagram. In that 3D diagram, this is the equatorial plane. Okay. So we can define those things in words. So the outer circle, that's called the primitive. Okay, so it represents the horizontal plane. So it represents the horizontal plane equivalent to the equatorial circle. The next is two important things are the great circles and the small circles. So these represent planes, and they appear as curved lines. Kind of like lines of longitude on Earth. They all converge at the poles. Then you have small circles which represent constant angle from vertical. So you can measure basically the angles, okay, used for lines like axes or plunges. Okay, so they're typically used for lines. We saw like axes or poles. So if you want to find out, so for example, in this, there are these small circles. There's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So like that, you will have basically overall, it will go all the way to 90 degrees. Okay. And you can define based on these what is the dip of a given uh, let's say point. If you plot a point is plotted here, you can know that this point is you go from here 10, 20, 30, 40. Okay, it is 40-degree inclination from the vertical or 50-degree from the horizontal. Or if a dot plots here, for example, you can say it is 50-degree angle from the vertical. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, it will be 90 at the poles. Okay, so there is small circle, great circle, then there is a center point. Which is the pole, also called, it is actual, sometimes the pole of the whole, projection of the pole of the 3D sphere. Okay, so this is the zenith or vertical direction. And then you have radial lines. If you want to plot them, these are not, do not exist. These are used, plotted to measure azimuth. So for example, if a plane, let's say, plots a great circle, plots like this, so you can draw a line from the center and say this is the radial line. Okay, and then you can say, okay, from north, how much is the angle? Okay, so each of these is this 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So it is like actually 40 degrees from here. So 10, 20, 30, 40. So 40 degrees from north, that will be the azimuth. In reality, how do we plot it? Okay, so you can rotate. This is like a graph paper which you can rotate. Okay, it doesn't have to be oriented always north south. So for example, if you have to draw a great circle over here, if a plane is like this, it is inclined in that direction. So first thing you will do is you will rotate the stereo net so that this 90 degree comes to 40 degrees, and then you can make that plot and rotate the stereo net back again. So I will show you how you can do that. So if, for example, you don't have to do this in exam, this is just for your understanding, to feed your curiosity. Otherwise, these kind of figures that we drew, they will not give you a practical in the exam. So for example, these kind of things, that is sufficient. If you can understand from it that the orange plane is oriented north south, the green plane is oriented east west, so that is what we plot in the stereo net, and we might rotate it for that purpose. So let me make it even smaller. So for example, if you have a plane, okay, oriented 40 degrees from north and dipping, or it has an inclination 50 degrees from horizontal. Okay, how will you plot it? So the first thing you will do is you will take this stereo net. Okay, you will take this stereo net and say where is it is saying 40 degrees from the north. So this is north. Okay, and then you plot in the from the north 10, 20, 30, 40. Okay, that is my 40. You make a dot here. Okay, that is a 40 degree orientation. You take this stereo net, you rotate it. Okay, now it is oriented 40 degrees. You will make your plot from 40 degrees. So, but even at 40 degrees, you see there are many circles. There is a great circle like this. There is a great circle like this. There is a great circle. Which one will you choose? You will choose it depending on the dip. The second orientation is it is 50 degrees from the horizontal. So the dip is 50 degrees from the horizontal. So that is, this is the center line, that is 0 degree dip. So let's say even before we rotate it, we can make those things, but we will not be able to do that again. So let's keep it like this only. 0 degrees, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So you draw it like this. If you were to do it in real life, in a practical setting. So this becomes your plot. And then you can basically, what you can do is, let's take a copy of this, rotate the stereo net back again, or even get rid of the stereo net. Altogether, like whatever you want to do. Now you get that plot. Okay. Is this clear, everyone? I will finally just get rid of even of that stereo net. So you are left with this plot like that. Okay. So that plane that I said is oriented in that direction. It is dipping that way. It will plot like that. Is this clear, everyone? Again, you don't have to write this in exam. From exam point of view, you'll understand it even better once we have gone through the PYQs. From exam point of view, you can think of it like if someone asks you some question subjectively, how will you answer that? So from exam point of view, typically the things that they can ask is what is stereographic projection, what is a stereo net, okay, uh, and how do you plot lines and planes on a stereo net, what is difference between wolf net and schmidt net. So those kind of things, some of those things, for example this exercise here I gave you just for your understanding. Similarly this thing is mostly for your understanding. This thing they can ask in exams, what are the different elements of a stereo net, so you have to write this. So this kind of question can come in the exam. Why I gave you these examples to make your build your understanding, because we will use stereo nets in subsequent lectures when we study classification of crystals into crystal systems. Okay, that's all for today. Any questions? So we are done with stereo nets. We will start with Hermann Moygan international notation in the next class. Any questions? All right, so if there are no further questions, we will stop the lecture here and I will see you all again in the next class on Tuesday.